Worms, whatever small they may seem, one of the most important science pioneers, favored for his theory of evolution, considered these squirming organisms to be the significant flora and fauna. Charles Darwin investigated the enquiring worms for 38 years past until a book on just before his passing in 1881. Darwin thought that worms were so, if it's significant, it must originate from being too wonderful for typical organs like having many hearts in the lungs, to resurrect beyond their physical form and essence, almost older than the world itself. Here are 15 amazing worm-related facts. Hello and welcome to KYC News. If you paralyze 50 worms, known to have spent too much time in the light the Earth's crust as they crawl, worms discovered digging in the gloomy, soggy Earth and so highly susceptible to light. Since worms lack sight, they use their scarcely visible skin to be detected alone in the sun. Worms will really scuttle away from the sun's rays so their skin remains protected moist. If worms spend more time in the light, they'll become paralyzed in less than an hour. When this occurs, they are in a predicament, unable to retreat into the shadows, and as a result, 14 worms shrivel and perish. Those who cannot breathe through their skin lungs. All living things require oxygen. Worms are a startling exception to this rule. How the worms get the oxygen? They are unable to breathe via their mouths. Moreover, they lack a nose. Worms have a thin membrane in place of lungs. Each oxygen through a porous skin. The thin, virtually transparent walls let the air in. Bodies that are translucent. The wet mucus on the skin of worms aids in dissolving the oxygen. Therefore, they must continue to be moisturized. A dried out worm suffocates and dies. If, however, their surroundings is too wet, they let 30 worms cans drown. Can regrow certain body parts. One of the most misinterpreted things is this. Facts about worms: if you cut a worm in half, depending on the location of the cut, it essentially worms that repair missing segments have 5 hearts around, each of which is, if you could, head and before the catella, then it has a worm behind the chlorella. Possible tail. Cool regeneration, right? Nonetheless, avoid doing it to test the opposite. You'll need to intercede on behalf of others. Unfair circumstance that is harming something just to see if it grows back, and half he never acts polite. Before we get on, kindly click the subscribe button. What's below, and ring the bell to find out being notified of new releases like this one. Worms, meanwhile, are cold-blooded and possessed. Due to the fact that worms are cold-blooded, they are unable to control their similar to mammals temperature, meaning they will have the same body temperature as their environment. Therefore, chilly conditions beneath the soil are ideal, whereas excessive sun exposure is not. Worms that could potentially be fatal do not having a heart with several chambers like mammals and reptiles have 5 legs instead of 4. Chaotic single-chamber arches works like a heart and pumps 5 hearts pump blood throughout their bodies. Are near to the worm's head, so even when another person might be cold-blooded, towering, nasty, and lacking in blood type, that determines how they are several hearts rather than 11 of the typical worm. Berries lifespan. Worms' lifespans can vary greatly. The species in a protected area. Some species of in a safe environment. Worms have a 4 to 8 year lifespan. Worms have numerous worms in the wild. Raptors' typical lifespans are generally relatively brief in duration. On average, a composting worm's lifespan is around. Worms have microscopic hairs on them after 2 years. Known to slither along the Earth's worms have a crust on their writhing bellies. Barbs that are all really little, known as setae, over their bodies, respectively. Section includes set that support the animal movement through the soil, enables the organism to cling to the nearby dirt. Beset and I are powerful individuals who, produced from the same substance that is used to, they are capable of getting under our fingernails. Worms are so capable of loving themselves incredible that they can reproduce on their own. Very severe parasites are born in terms they are hermaphroditic, which means they one sexual organ that serves both men and women. Especially the red whittler species cannot raise children on their own. Therefore, cannot always complete everything by ourselves. Applet rings are found on adult worms. Ella is a worm breeder who is very busy. Recognizable by their unusual ring referred to as the Ella band. These worms are Adil's breeding worms. Unique band in the form of a ring formed by lining up their patella, connecting their antic heads to a cocoon, is then created at the lid. Ella Platonov and the worm is once per hour simple check to see if they are wearing the young ring. 7 worms emerge from their cocoons. In a mature red whittler room, a maximum of 3 little cocoons per week. Lemon-shaped and golden yellow in hue hatchling red whittler worms within it may take the cocoon up to 11 weeks to develop. Each cocoon reaches maturity before emerging, typically produces 2 to 4 young worms. A cocoon may remain inert for years before the circumstances are ideal, but did you know a worm colony's population can double every 60 to 90 days? 6th of the Gippsland is the world's longest worm. Enormous earthworm. One of the biggest. Average number of earthworms worldwide is 4. Feet long are equivalent to around 1 inch and 10 feet in height and 10 feet in diameter. Gippsland giant spent a long time in the wild. The only protected species is the earthworm. Located in a small area of land close to the Australia's continental bottom. When the Gippsland huge earthworm, it was in error when it was discovered in the 1870s. The largest earthworm ever found for a snake was discovered in South Africa and was 22 fine feet long. When people consume 50% of their body weight, worms are a common fast food item. Processors, and over half of their average body weight each day. A family of 4's leftover food would require roughly 20,000 worms to every day. A worm's digestive process. A tube that goes straight is a system all the way back at the mouth. From the front far behind, this entails the complete their body is one long length. 6 or 7 digestive tracts are present. Numerous varieties of earthworms. Worms are just so unlucky that they are present except on one of the continents. There are roughly 6,000 in Antarctica. They are an earthworm species, and introduction of invasive species can adjust a variety of factors in the soil ecology, which is likely the reason Darwin considered them to be among the most. 3 worms are significant creatures on Earth. Are older than the first dinosaurs. Dinosaurs debuted roughly 231 million years ago. Thousands of years ago, during the Mesozoic era, the earliest vertebrates are earthworms, which general and have existed for over 600 million years ago. Thus, even if they may be the creatures they've preyed on the most, also succeeded in creating some significant adaptability too. Since worms are 90% water because of their reliance on moisture, 90% of them are formed of water to provide a nice parallel. 75% of people are humans water, hence, if they leave dampness or overly prolonged exposure to light, it cautions that they will undoubtedly perish. Eat as well a much of protein, they could seem malformed. The most fascinating worm information is a problem with protein toxicity. Can also, did you know it's referred to as a sour crop? But if worms consume the most protein possible, difficulty digesting it and serious risk. For instance, the food that the worms consume. Intestines, as a result of the acidity and the gas accumulation, may cause the worms to burst. Intestines resulting in harm that cannot be repaired leave the worms even appearing malformed. In most circumstances, like a string of pearls, avoiding this circumstance can be done by feeding my goldfish's worms too much. These wriggling bloomies are unable to say no to a satisfying supper or a full stomach. What is this page's strangest worm fact? Please subscribe and hit the bell icon.